and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week, when our schedules allow, I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos who love film to discuss a movie, either current or classic, and share a little bit of movie news from now and then, maybe. And this week, we're going to do both. We actually are going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of another historic film. Over the last few weeks, we've celebrated Jaws, we celebrated Friday the 13th, and this week we're going to be celebrating 9 to 5, starring Dolly Parton, Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, and more. We're also going to be dishing up a little bit of movie news in the form of talking about some trailers that came out of the DC event that happened over the weekend. So lots to talk about, lots to discuss, but before we can do any of that properly, let me introduce you to my wonderful, fantastic, incredible, amazing, add in other adjectives that describe their astoundingness, co-hosts, and those wonderful guys are Jim Pugliafco. Welcome to the show, babe. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. Thanks, babe. Glad to finally get to this point of having some movie fun with you guys and doing the podcast. So welcome, everybody. It's going to be fun.
I agree. And Will Lindis is with us as well. Welcome, Will. How are you?
Hey, Brad. Actually, I'm feeling husky, hairy, and huggable tonight. And, yep, still homo. So it checks. It all checks out.
Well, as long as the 4 H's of the gay bear movie loving not so apocalypse come together in a peaceful way on our show's airtime, I suppose we're doing pretty good, right?
With our powers combined, we are MBP.
Oh God. I just had this flashback to Matee from Captain Planet going, heart.
Hey, heart's important. Heart's important. Heart's what, it's the fifth element. It is the fifth element. Spoilers for the
Multipass.
Fifth Element.
Oh, is that what that movie was about?
I think so.
They're basically summoning Captain Planet in the future.
I guess so. Hey, Peter Levins is with us in the live chat. Hey, Pete, husband of our very own Magic Mike Levins from the Real Gay Movie Show, who's been on our show a few times.
Hey, Pete.
Pete, great to see you. He says, oh God, is this spoiler free? Pete, that is a fantastic question. We are going to chat about a 40-year-old movie. So, Jim, Will, spoiler free, spoiler section.
I think we're gonna spoil this one
right through 9 to 5.
Yeah,
but here's the thing, though.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a movie where I don't know. I don't know if spoilers are going to make a big difference in how somebody how somebody receives this movie. That's my opinion. But
I don't disagree.
Yeah. Like as far as who
gets some
killed and stuff like that, like we're not. Yeah, we're going to give that stuff away. Like
Pete says, I was kind of being silly, but also noting that I've never seen 9 to 5. No worries, Pete. A lot of people have not yet seen 9 to 5. Several weeks ago, we did Tu Wong Fu. Thanks for everything. A lot of people hadn't seen that. It was the 25th anniversary of that movie. A lot of folks haven't seen Friday the 13th, the original film from 1980. And that's part of the reason why we're doing these retrospectives, because, I mean, over the last 100 years, there's a lot of fucking really good movies out there that a lot of people haven't seen. So it's fun to kind of go back, revisit some of those. And, Pete, if it sounds like fun as we're talking about it, maybe you'll go check it out. Not to tip my hat too much. I put on a hat just so I could do that joke on camera. But it's pretty worth watching, FYI. We've got Tony Gonzalez in the live chat with us as well. He says, hi, guys, and gorgeous Brad. Tony, thank you. That's very sweet of you. I appreciate the compliment. Before we get to our movie discussion, though, a couple things that we want to talk through coming out of the DC event over the weekend. But before we get to that even, guys, breaking news. from Harkins Theaters. I just saw on Facebook, because everybody gets their news from Facebook these days. Harkins Theaters is reopening all of their theaters here in Arizona, which is like the number 4 hotspot for COVID in the world right now. And I understand Alamo Draft Houses are opening all over the place. AMC theaters are opening. Are you guys ready to return to movie theaters? Is this good news, you think?
Well, I know opinions are going to vary on this, but for me, the answer is fuck no. I am not going back into a movie theater right now. I'm just not. I don't care really what movie is playing. I don't care if they come out with a sequel to 9 to 5. I'm not fucking, I'm not going back to the movies, to a movie theater. Now, don't get me wrong. I really, really miss going to movie theaters. I mean, it's been part of our lives for like how long? Like going to the movies, like, 1, 2, or 3 times a week, right? Maybe more in festivals. I mean, just kind of that thrill of like walking into a movie, sitting down and seeing a film that the sense of discovery, the smell of the popcorn, and just everything, the big screen, the sound, and seeing it with an audience. And I don't know, the way they've got it, the way they're rolling this out. Number one, I just think it's too early. Even if they do take the precautions, which I know that some of them are supposedly taking precautions, I just don't see it as the right time for me. So I'm going to leave it there. I'm sure we'll talk more about it. But What do you guys think?
I don't even think it's a matter of if they, supposedly are not taking precautions. I have every belief that a lot of the theaters are in good faith, doing the best that they can to try to get things open in what they would consider, like, the safety measures they're rolling out and all of those things. I have no doubt that they're sincere in what they're doing. That said, I don't think they adequately cover, I guess, the reality of the situation. Realistically, what we know about COVID-19 and what we know about it is, of course, still evolving. But what we know about it is its transmission is not aided by closed, or is very much aided by closed circulation venting systems. So when you're sitting in a movie theater, it doesn't matter if there's someone sitting next to you or 2 seats over. Sure, that's helpful. But being in that confined area for a prolonged period of time, breathing that same air, especially when a lot of these theaters have a policy where you're allowed to remove your mask to eat popcorn or to eat food, which means that, then those people are exhaling, they're coughing, they're sneezing, whatever it happens to be. I'm not one personally to get too harsh on people that feel like, okay, it's open now, therefore I'm going to. I get it. I totally do. There's nothing I want more than to get back into the theater. But for me, it's too soon. And it's probably going to be too soon for quite some time.
Would it be different, guys, if... I mean, I realize half the fun of going to the movies is, concessions, but would it be different if they weren't letting you eat in the theater? Like you can only take your mask off to take a quick sip of a soda or something? No, because there's no way to really once the lights go out, there's no real way to enforce those policies. Unless you have an usher whose job is to just sort of shine a flashlight down the row every 5 minutes to check who's wearing a mask. And at that point, I feel like the theatrical experience is so compromised that, it's not worth it. I mean, if ushers can spot people giving hand jobs in the seat next to them, I'm sure they could spot people not wearing masks.
I don't think ushers are that good at spotting hand jobs.
Will knows from personal experience.
Wait, what? No.
It's not that good.
Oh gosh, Daniel Jensen. Hey, Daniel.
Hey,
Daniel, we hear you've been a little under the weather lately. Very sorry to hear that, but hope you feel better soon. Daniel says, I only want movie theater popcorn I can't recreate, but I will wait. So maybe that kind of plays into this a little bit, right? Because when you go to see a movie, intrinsically, you might want that buttery, poppy carby goodness. And if you're watching on a giant screen and you don't have that, right, why are you even going to the movies, I suppose?
Brad, you haven't told us where you come down on this issue.
Oh, I've already been back to theaters like 5 times at the no.
That's
totally
right. That's right. That's right.
Well, by the theater, I mean our projector room where we make up fake movie tickets and pop our own popcorn for funsies. It's too early. I don't know what kind of cleaning you could do of the air itself to try and make it safe at this point. Not only that, but a friend of ours and a friend of the show, actually, Russell, was talking about, and I'll leave his last name out because he works for a theater chain. I don't want to get him in trouble. But he was talking earlier on Facebook about how when he works for a theater, and even with their stringent cleaning practices, they still have to turn those theaters around super, super fast before the next group comes in. And I'm like, if I'm with a 4-person crew whose job it is to clean a 300-seat auditorium, how deeply do you think those seats are being wiped down and sanitized? I've gone to the movie theater and everything looks clean, but then I put my hand in my cup holder to put my keys in the cup holder, and it's wet and sticky inside the cup holder, right? I think you need a couple of hours and a 20-person crew after each screening, just to sanitize all the surfaces, much less the air issues.
And even then, like you said, I mean, it doesn't really matter how clean they make. They could hose the whole place down with bleach. First of all, that's impractical, but secondly, all it takes is one person who doesn't even know they're carrying a virus or whatever, to take their thing down to make a drink, and they breathe out these particles, and the air conditioner is blowing across the row. That's gonna potentially carry that out there. And look, I get it. These businesses are really hurting. I don't know. We haven't really been in a restaurant either. Mm-mm. I mean, for a sit down meal, it's basically if we eat out, it's drive-throughs or pickup. That's it. Right. And I feel for these places, some of my favorite places to eat in town, I know are struggling because you go in, they're empty. There's some people ordering out, but I can't believe that it's a significant portion of the business they were doing before COVID, at least here. So I worry about that. And of course, movie theaters are the same thing. They rely on a lot of people filling the seats. And it's a sad situation, and especially here in the U.S. till we get some kind of vaccine going, and that the public has ready access to, hopefully free and available vaccines. I just don't see myself going to a theater yet. Well,
fingers crossed that happens as soon as possible. We would all love to make a return to movie theaters. And of course, we're not judging if you decide you do want to return earlier than a vaccine becoming available. But we hope everyone is able to stay as safe as possible. And I think we're just going to continue to enjoy movies as much as we can at home for the time being. Speaking of new movies, and who knows if we'll get to see them at home or in a theater when they come out, but Will, our resident comic expert here on the Movie Bears podcast, I believe there was some big news over the weekend. Was there not?
Yeah, there was. So as a response to Comic-Con having to change up their model, and by changing up their model, I mean not happening, DC has through a virtual event called the DC FanDome, like FanDome, but with an extra E at the end of it. And the idea behind it was to be sort of like a celebration of all things sort of DC Comics, DC, specifically in the kind of the movie, television, games side of the industry. And they released a lot of different trailers, several video game trailers, several trailers that we're not going to talk about, like Wonder Woman 84 and a Black Adam animatic teaser. But there were 3 of note that I think warrant discussion to some degree or another. The very first of which is the trailer for the Suicide Squad, which is due to come out in 2021. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, I already watched Suicide Squad a few years ago. And if you did, I apologize. But if, it sucked, is why. But no, this one is coming out in 2021, and it's sort of DC's way of saying, hey, that didn't work out super well, so we are going to strip it of its parts and do something very different with it. The very different thing that they're doing with it is they brought over James Gunn, writer and director of a lot of different things, but most notably Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and 2. If you watched those movies, you can get a sense for sort of what they're going for here. Almost an entirely new cast, minus you do have Margot Robbie coming back as Harley Quinn. You've got Jai Courtney coming back as Captain Boomerang, and I think we still have Viola Davis coming back as Amanda Waller. But aside from that, it's new characters, new actors, and while we don't really have a lot, the teaser trailer that we got to see was more or less like a behind the actor studio type thing, with the actors sort of like giving one-liners about what it's like to be on the set and seeing some maybe unfinished shots. This is still very far out. I have to say I'm actually pretty excited about this one, which should be notable because, as I just mentioned, the first Suicide Squad movie was one of the hands down worst films I've ever seen in my life. Like, I hated the experience of watching that one. It was just very poorly put together, all things considered. This is, if they were going to make another Suicide Squad movie, and I like the comics, I like what they're doing with it, the idea of bringing in specifically Gunn sensibilities and taking just a few key elements and then just sort of rebuilding all of the parts around it, I think is the right approach. So color me cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, watching the trailer, it was interesting to see them kind of take an old school comic approach to it. I think the first movie kind of diverged a lot from that. So that definitely piqued my interest. Although I was expecting like another team of like 5 to 7 people. I think we ended up getting like 12 or 13 characters. And so my concern, even though I love James Gunn, love what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy, I love the look of the trailer, I'm like, fuck, like there's so many characters. Like that's going to be really hard, I think, for me to follow and engage with.
I think knowing the material, I don't think all those characters are going to make it through this movie. And I would be okay with that if it's done skillfully. That doesn't mean that every death has to have like, a long maudlin dramatic moment built into it. But the one that came out a couple years ago, it put all of its characters up on a pedestal, except for ones who were very obvious red shirts, and you kind of knew immediately who was going to make it through and who wasn't. I would hope, and I have faith that if Gunn's going to be following that same like nobody is safe mentality, maybe minus Harley Quinn and Margot Robbie. I mean, I think at this point she is sort of like the 4th biggest character in all of DC Comics. So I think she probably gets past. But I think the rest of the characters, if they feel actually expendable and James Gunn does a good job of playing into that, I'd be on board.
Yeah, so like you guys, I didn't like the first Suicide Squad movie at all. And again, I'm not up to speed really on the comics. I wasn't into the Suicide Squad group of characters, and the first movie didn't catch me. However, I do love what James Gunn did with Guardians of the Galaxy. So that's kind of my only positive, I guess, that might draw me to this movie. I mean, the trailer was more like a teaser, like an early kind of teaser kind of thing that showed you a few little just disjointed scenes, and then, like you said, a cast introduction kind of sizzle reel, I guess. And that was cool because there were characters in there that I'm not familiar with at all.
Like Polka Dot Man.
Like Polka Dot Man. Yeah. I'm like, oh wait, was he in the other movie? I don't think he was, but then again, I might have been asleep at that time. I don't remember. So with James Gunn's sensibility, it might be worth watching. That's kind of the only thing. And the story is, so I tried to watch the trailer, and like I told you guys earlier, I clicked on the wrong thing because there's a Suicide Squad shooter video game that's coming out, I guess around the same time. And it also dropped a trailer. So I'm just looking for Suicide Squad trailer, and boom, I see that, cinematic, blah, 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 blah. So I click on that, and I'm watching this thing, and I'm like, this looks like shit. This looks like a video game fucking cutscene, and I hate the way those things look. And then it was just all like, explosions and shooting and, bodies flying. And I'm like, this looks fucking terrible. Like, what the hell is going on? And I'm like, I'm out. I'm totally out. But then I found the right one, and I'm like, oh, now this kind of looks pretty interesting. It's at least got some characters. James Gunn is talking about it. So, yeah, I get, of course I'll watch it with you guys, whether we're watching it at home by then or hopefully in the movie theaters by then.
Speaking of by then, the Suicide Squad is technically slated for August 6th, 2021, but we are in a global pandemic. Dates mean nothing. We'll watch it when we watch it.
Right. It's only a year from now, right? Who knows how long that is in pandemic time.
Next trailer I want to shift over to, I'm going to jump ahead one just because I think this one is one we can maybe bank a little bit of time on. We'll see, maybe not. We got to see a trailer for Justice League, the Snyder Cut. As you all remember, famously, Justice League came out. It was also not very good, but there was some controversy at the time because Snyder had to leave the project at the time because of a family emergency, and Joss Whedon came in and did some pickup shots, and the number is sort of up for debate, but somewhere between like a quarter and a third of the movie was more than likely Whedon's footage spliced together with what Snyder did, and it became a very tonally complicated thing. So now the internet demanded the Snyder Cut, and HBO Max threw like $30 million at it.
FanDome.
And so now in 2021, HBO Max will have the Snyder Cut. We got to see a trailer for it, which was, a lot of footage of Justice League, some of which we've seen before, some of it just the same thing from a different angle. Now slowed down with the Hallelujah song put behind it.
So
I'm not excited at this at all. I kind of struggle where it's bizarre to me, honestly, that people look at Zack Snyder, a guy who has more bad movies under his belt than good by a pretty wide ratio. And people have looked at that and said, you know what? All that footage on the cutting room floor, all that footage he didn't get, secretly, this guy who doesn't know how to make good movies, that's where the good movie was hiding this whole time. So now we're going to actually get a good movie out of it.
Question. Could you be any Snyder about your thoughts?
Believe me, I can be. So this is, the internet outlash on it was honestly kind of gross in places. The trailer doesn't excite me, and I don't know that I necessarily want to see another swing at a bad movie, because I think that Snyder would have to be a fundamentally different filmmaker than he is to turn what Justice League was into something that I would want to watch. That's just me, though. You guys might be more optimistic.
Brad, I'm going to let you go first on this one.
No, I'm not. I watched the trailer and I was like, oh, look, like some different footage. Okay. And it seems like it's trying to fashion a new narrative. Obviously the big CGI big bad is still the big bad of this movie.
Rockman.
But
Fiery Rockman.
Yeah, there just wasn't enough I don't know, to spark my interest that much. And I think it's hard for me too, because I didn't like Justice League that much. There's a lot of baggage that comes from seeing the first film. Well, seeing the film that came out previously, I don't know if I'm going to be able to divest myself of that baggage and try and approach this movie, with a clean slate and maybe give it the due that I would have if Snyder's version had come out first. And I think that's unfortunate. As much as we joke on the show about like Snyder's penchant for like muted colors and certain stylistic touches, I think there were some glimpses of some really good things in Man of Steel, for instance, and I love the Aquaman character, but that's because he had his own movie afterward that I really enjoyed. So for me, this just feels like a giant meh. I might check it out, but I also understand it's like 3.5 hours long or something. And I think it's going to take me like 3 days to get through it, if that's the case.
Yeah, So this is an interesting phenomenon, right? That we're even getting this movie up against a movie that didn't perform so well. I think it was a big disappointment to a lot of people. Yeah. For me, I mean, seeing it as just another superhero movie, it had some big issues. Don't get me wrong, but and if they can put a different narrative behind this movie and show us something a little new, it might. Maybe I'll be okay with it. I don't know. Remains to be seen, but it is going to be interesting that, usually we think like when a bad movie comes out, but it's going to hurt like subsequent movies, like sequels or whatever that might come after it. This is a case where I think a bad movie before this one might actually help, might actually help the success of this movie, because it depends on the marketing. Like if there's enough new in here and, kind of like another chance to make what was a mediocre to bad movie something different and something more exciting. I don't know. It could work.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think of it like Superman 2. We reviewed Superman movie. Yes. A couple months ago on the show, and we talked about how Superman 2 was taken away from the original director. It only used like 30%, I guess, of his footage. They shot new stuff, And so the Richard Donner cut came out, 25, 30 years later, and they reused the Donner, footage that was shot, but not included in the film. And in that case, I felt like it made Superman 2 a lot better. A lot of the dumb stuff, like Superman being able to shoot a laser beam out of his finger and throwing the saran wrap S shield, were like totally gone. Richard Lester, who was the director who replaced Donner, added those things in. And so, I don't know, Jim, hearing you talk about it like that, I don't know, makes me think of that and maybe gives me marginally a little more hope. But at the same time, I haven't been a big fan of Snyder's other films and his work in this universe prior to this anyway. So, God, I don't know. This is hard.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's probably a sound business decision, because for reasonably low amount of money, $30 million, which when you're talking about like, big studios, throwing an extra 30 mil or so isn't the end of the world. Mm-hmm. When we're in a spot where a lot of productions on other films has slowed or halted, it becomes a pretty financially viable thing to say, well, we want some new content to make this new streaming platform, HBO Max, have a bit more of a heft to it. Let's put this thing that people say they want. And it also makes them a little bit critically foolproof too, because at the end of the day, if people don't like it, they're just going to say, well, people didn't really like the first one and you didn't give this one a shot. And if people really do like it, then they're going to be able to say, hey, look, we took a chance on something and it worked out. So I think this is a win-win situation for HBO. Go ahead.
James in the live chat says, if I wanted a Justice League story by someone who absolutely doesn't get the characters and is absolutely embarrassed by their origins, I'd just keep reading current DC comics. Will, what do you think about that?
Fucking burn. I don't disagree. I mean, I've sort of ducked out of DC Comics for a bit. I do a thing with DC Comics where about the time that they start to frustrate me. I step away for a bit, and then I come back when they have their next like writer shuffle. And so I'm currently on DC, and I are currently seeing other people.
Well, you may have stepped away from the comics for a little while, but I believe there's one more trailer you wanted to bring up.
There is, and I think this is the one that this is sort of the big daddy of the trailers from this one. It was the trailer that I think got the most buzz, and probably rightfully so, given the status of this film. It's the trailer for The Batman, which is the new Batman movie, also due out in 2021, maybe? Question mark. This one is a sort of a different continuity Batman in that it is dealing with a different lead actor. This is Robert Pattinson stepping into the role as Batman Bruce Wayne. Director Matt Reeves is coming in. We have some pretty interesting casting here with Paul Dano and Colin Farrell and Zoe Kravitz all showing up in the trailer in some pretty interesting roles. One thing that's pretty notable about this version of the Batman is that it is much more of a noir style film. I mean, it's still a superhero movie about a man wearing a bat costume. No, every version of Batman is that to some degree or another. But I think in a lot of ways, this one looks to borrow a lot more from the sort of like the Year 2 comics, which showed sort of like Batman, not in his earliest of days, but definitely Batman early on in his career, much more of a detective story of trying to solve the crimes and solve the riddles and piece things together. And I like that idea for that tone. I like the things that I saw here. It's dark and gritty. And I know we just spent a lot of time complaining about Zack Snyder being dark and gritty, but I think there's a difference between being dark and gritty because you think it looks cool and dark and gritty because it tonally matches the story that you're trying to tell. And so far, based on this trailer, it looks like all signs point towards absolutely yes for me for the Batman.
Yeah, I'm excited about this one too, and I wasn't super excited before. I mean, we've talked on the show about Robert Pattinson and sort of his meteoric climb from Cedric Diggory in the Harry Potter movies and the sparkly vampire in Twilight. He's done some amazing things. Lighthouse, I'm looking at you. But I was a little curious, how he would be as Batman. And I got to say, I think just based on what we've seen so far, he brings a lot of presence and maybe not as much of the brooding, but definitely sort of that like cold steel, like strength and vengey anger. So I'm excited to see more of him in this role. But I think even more exciting for me is Jeffrey Wright as Commissioner Gordon in this film. I actually didn't realize that he was going to be playing Commissioner Gordon. I heard he was attached to the film, and then I saw him in the trailer, and I'm like, holy fucking shit. Arlo's dad from The Good Dinosaur is Commissioner Gordon, and I'm totally for it. I think he is fantastic. Yeah, I see the Arlo over your shoulder. I think he is just fantastic for that role, and it's not one that I would have like ever mentally put him into. But fuck, like, can we please have a Jeffrey Wright Commissioner Gordon TV show? Like, please, 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 please. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, boy, I don't know. I might be Batmaned out, really. Like, seriously, with all of the Batman films, and they just seem to keep, for me, just going darker and darker and darker. Like, every single Batman iteration just keeps getting darker and darker, and that probably follows some of the evolution of the comics, which again I don't know. Which I guess is fine if that's what the FanDome wants, then the FanDome should get that. But I don't know. I don't know what else I want from Batman. What's going to draw me to this movie is that I do want to see what Robert Pattinson does as the Batman. I want to see Jeffrey Wright because I like the work that he does, and I think he really embodies the character, and I think he's going to be really good as Commissioner Gordon. and what else they do with that. But I don't know. Just generally, the tone of these films is a little bit heavy for me. Remember, though, I grew up on 60s Batman, so it's
Batman.
Yeah.
You want the Bat
Hey,
credit
old chum.
card and
Let's go,
Bat
chum.
nipples. It's interesting. I think that what is promising about this for me is that it's not just the direction of Batman that's changed. It maybe hasn't. It just seems like it's more calcified into what it's becoming. But I think that DC's overall approach has been to remove some of that same grimdark from the other characters surrounding him. What makes Batman so compelling in terms of like the comic book and the Justice League and just any iteration you have of him is he is very self-serious. He's very haunted by all of these things when a lot of the people around him aren't. You have Batman versus Superman as
drag, man. He's just
he is a drag, but the problem that we've had in these movies for such a long time is everyone else has had to also be grimdark, and so it sort of felt like we didn't get a chance to really like feel that contrast. Now that we're starting to see some of these movies lighten up a little bit, I mean, think about it. We had Aquaman, Shazam, and Harley Quinn, Birds of Prey were kind of the last three big ones, and all three of those were very movies that leaned towards fun, more lighthearted, or each one had its own tone and story. And so I'm okay coming back to grim for Batman because that's where it fits. That's where it belongs.
Right.
I just don't want it seeping outside.
And it should be noted too, DC is really embracing its multiverse aspect for this, right? Like the Robert Pattinson, the Batman, just like the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie, don't exist as part of like the main like prime DC shared universe that they're creating. They're sort of like one-off alternate universe, retellings. And I actually think that's kind of cool that they're doing that because sort of akin to some of the stuff they're doing on the CW DC shows. It lets them take some of these characters, put alternate spins on them, and do their own thing without, harming the Snyderverse that they, have created and that they're trying to create this shared sandbox with. Some news recently came out that Michael Keaton is reprising his role as the 1980s Batman in the upcoming Ezra Miller Flash movie. Another, alternate universe thing. So I don't know. I'm optimistic. I'm digging that they get to play in their own little sandbox and do their own thing. But interesting comment from Mary. Hey, Mary. Mary says, I don't see Robert Pattinson as quote, strong like Batman. He's so tall and skinny and lean. He's an interesting choice for Batman. What do you guys think? Like a tall, skinny, lanky Batman? Is that super weird for you? Does it work?
It feels like it works for me, predominantly because from everything that I've read in terms of sort of where they're sourcing the story out of this is a younger Batman. Like, not like kid Batman or teen Batman or anything like that, but earlier on in his career, he's, if you look at him versus, I mean, even Affleck, Affleck was playing a much more, I guess closer to his actual age, Bruce Wayne, someone who's been around the block a few times. Whereas this is at least again, just from the trailers, looks like a Bruce Wayne who is still very much battling some demons and figuring out how to make his place in a world that is, quite lethally insane. So I'm into that. I think that Pattinson might not work for certain types of stories, like certainly the types of things that they told is sort of like like the Frank Miller inspired, Batman having 20 or 30 years of experience under his belt. Pattinson just doesn't have that vibe for it. But for this particular type of story, I'm on board, especially, for me right now, also, you could tell me that Robert Pattinson was cast as fill in the blank, and I'm going to watch the hell out of it because he is slowly turning into just one of the best actors working right now.
I'll have to say, like, watching this trailer specifically, I can't say I was looking for that. Like, his physique things that stood out about his physique versus other Batmans, like Keaton or Affleck or whoever. But I'll have to watch it again and see that. It didn't strike me. It didn't come across the screen like, oh my God, Batman's skinnier. But it may be. Obviously, the actor is not. In real life is not as big as a Batman, but there's a lot they can do with costume and special effects to kind of offset that a little bit and bring him more toward what we're used to as far as the stature, of Batman.
Indeed. I mean, I know he was going through a pretty extensive weight training routine to bulk up a bit for the role, but he's got a small frame, man. Like, there's only so much you can do with that, in such a limited time. Mary followed up. She said, like, every time he took his shirt off in Twilight, I was like, put it back on. Mary, now that he's bulked up a bit, you're going to have to come back after you see the Batman. I'm sure we'll get a shirtless scene and let us know if it was any better for you. We'd be interested to find out.
Wow. I never did watch the Twilight series. Probably never will. But yeah, I've seen Pattinson in other films, and he's pretty slight. You're right.
Yeah, that's true. Well, speaking of slight, we don't want to slight our main movie review for this week. We could probably talk a lot more about the news coming out of DC FanDome. But are you guys ready to talk about some Dolly Parton, Lily Tomlin, Jane Fonda, Dabney Coleman goodness?
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right. Excellent. Then how does it go? Stumble into the kitchen and make a cup of ambition.
Stumble out of bed.
Tumble out of bed.
Tumble out of bed. Stumble
to the kitchen.
Pour myself.
And then you pour yourself
a cup of ambition. There we go.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, yawn and stretch and try to come to life.
Okay, Jim, we need a whole version of that from you.
No,
please.
not right now. You're not getting it. Maybe later.
Oh boy. All right. Well, listen, we're going to talk all things 9 to 5 coming up here in just a moment. As we mentioned earlier on in the episode, we will be spoiling the heck out of 9 to 5. This is the 40th anniversary of the film, FYI. So we feel pretty justified not having a spoiler section. It'll just be all in for spoilers. But as was also mentioned earlier, this is one of those films where, even if you know the main thrust of some of the plot points, I don't think it's going to hurt your potential enjoyment of the film. But decide as you will if you want to stick around for the 9 to 5 discussion, although we certainly hope you will. We'd love to know what your thoughts are, if you've seen the movie, if you haven't yet, if it sounds interesting. But all of that said, here we go, our discussion of 9 to 5. All right, so Jim is kicking this one off for us. Sweetheart, this movie came out the year before I was born. Will, I'm not quite sure how old you were in 1980. Were you born yet?
-2.
Yeah, -2. Okay. So, Jim, you were around when this film came out. Seems fitting that maybe you talk a little bit about, what was this, a big film on the scene back then? What was your experience? What'd you think of the film? Take it away.
Sure. As you mentioned, 40 years old. This film came out in 1980. It stars Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and Dolly Parton as 3 office workers who live out their fantasies of getting even with and overthrowing their company's autocratic, sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical, bigot asshole boss played by Dabney Coleman. Yeah, so this movie, my history with this movie is I don't really have one. Like, yeah, I was, I certainly was young adult when this movie came out, and I just don't remember seeing it. I probably saw it in a movie theater, but it didn't make a huge impression on me. This movie was a very big movie when it came out. I think it was number 2 in box office that year, only second to a Star Wars movie. So I think Empire Strikes Back. I'm not sure which one it was. I think it might have been Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so really popular movie because of its wide appeal, right? I think this appealed to young people, your parents, your grandparents, pretty much everybody, male, female. I think this movie was just a really wide appeal. Obviously, it was Dolly Parton's first feature screen role in a major film. She also wrote the theme song that everybody knows, and we were singing through the intro to this movie. This movie is just a lot of fun. I mean, it's kind of it's all over the place in terms of tone. It's comedic. It's a comedic movie. And I was reading about the movie, and they said that originally, as this movie was written, it was a very dark movie. Like, people did die in like the plot of this movie as they were, as written. And then it just like, it wasn't working, as it was coming together. They said, oh, there's something wrong. And so they rewrote a lot of this to be more of a comedy film. And I think Jane Fonda was a big, she wasn't a writer on the film, but I think she had a lot of input. And she was kind of a front runner in those years for women's rights in the workplace. And she was a big proponent of that. And she was 100% behind this film, but she was afraid that with such a serious tone, it was going to like be maybe a turnoff to some people and not be able to get its message across, because this movie has a really positive message about the value of everybody in the workforce, including women. At the time, this was at 1980, so this was kind of at the end of a phase of women's right movement called women's lib at the time, women's liberation, right? To liberate them from under the thumb of the male-driven society. And to some degree, right, that still is going on today, right, to some degree. But back then, it was called the Women's Lib Movement, and I think in the movie they even refer to that a little bit. I think Dabney Coleman, the asshole boss, definitely kind of pushes back a little bit as what he sees as harassment from, quote, women's libbers. So that was pretty interesting. I do like Dabney Coleman. He has he plays just a kind of an awful person in this movie, like really, really bad, awful person caricature. But Dabney Coleman was a really good actor, and I love seeing him in this film. The three leads are great. I think if I have to pick a favorite, mine is Lily Tomlin in this film. I just love her character. I love almost anything that Lily Tomlin is in. I remember Lily Tomlin from an old comedy variety TV show called Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. If you guys remember any of that, she was a big player on Laugh-In. And so I like her. Of course, Dolly. Who doesn't love Dolly? Unfortunately, she always kind of plays in this movie, she does kind of play the a little bit of the, I don't know how to put this, kind of like
ditzy, unaware.
A little bit ditzy and unaware, and she does that sometimes in public appearance too. But we know, fans of Dolly Parton know, that she is one of the most intelligent people that you'll ever meet, and she has some really amazing opinions and insights into things. So yeah, I really, really love this movie.
If Dolly Parton became president and forgave someone's crime, would that be a Dolly Parton pardon?
Dolly Parton. It would just be a Dolly Parton.
Dolly Parton?
Yeah, Dolly Parton.
Will's shaking his head if you can't see it because you're listening.
Dolly Parton. Yeah.
Just no, Brad. Not that one.
I'd get behind a Dolly campaign right now. I would.
Michael in the live chat. Hey, Michael, good to see you. Welcome. He says, ironically enough, Lily Tomlin and Dabney Coleman were back together in the Beverly Hillbillies movie. I hadn't realized that until just now, but yeah, that's totally true.
And Jane Fonda and Dabney Coleman were together on Golden Pond. In case any of you have seen On Golden Pond.
That's true.
They're married. I think they were married, I believe, in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Will, what did you think of 9 to 5? Because I know this movie came out while, we weren't on the planet yet, but it was still popular and making the rounds when we were little. Was this something that you saw as a kid or came to later in life?
Yeah. So compared to a lot of the other retrospectives that we've done, this is one that I have less experience with, not no experience with, but less experience with. I mean, when we talk about horror movies, I know all those facts forward and backwards. We've, doing a bunch of LGBTQ screening for Tu Wong Fu, and even like studying Jaws and like film classes in college. But 9 to 5 is the one of these four that I watched once when I was younger. I couldn't tell you how old I was when it was. It was one of those movies that I saw, but it wasn't one that like I have like a milestone to say like, oh, I was 12 when I watched that. It was important because of this, that, and the other, which is the thing that I'd watched. We did end up screening it as one of our AGLIF monthly screenings because of Lily Tomlin. Literally 5 years to the day before I ended up rewatching it for this show, which was kind of a fun thing to discover on Facebook. So I come into this just as a person that likes the movie because I like the movie. It's a good movie. I think what's good about it is the best thing about it is the strength of these three leads. All three of these actresses are really, really good in this. I mean, it almost feels obvious to say Jane Fonda, she's a good actress, but Jane Fonda, she's a good actress. And she gets to play sort of I don't want to say necessarily straight woman in this, but I think that she is definitely the POV character. She's the one that is brought into this world of this office politics environment, and we sort of latch onto her to sort of like learn who and what everyone are. Lily Tomlin is absolutely amazing in this. She's my favorite too, Jim, mainly because she has just the best zingers all throughout this movie. Like the things just like, when Roz hands her some papers and say, you know where to stick this? And she says, yeah, I know where to stick this. Like she's able to deliver it with like such ease. You know exactly what she means. Yeah, you shove this up your ass. But it also comes off believable that the Roz character doesn't get that that's what she's saying. Dolly is sweet. She's amazing. And I mean, she's very pertinent right now with everything that's going on in the news with her right now, getting some blowback, which she doesn't deserve for just saying, yeah, I believe that Black Lives Matter. There's some Dolly fans who were surprised to hear that, and they can go take a very, very, very long walk off of a very, very, very short pier as far as I'm concerned. But aside from that, the movie is also very much ahead of its time. I mean, it really imagines a world, specifically an office environment, where, okay, well, what would happen if we did put women in charge? What would happen if we did say, hey, you get to make the rules? And at least in terms of this film's philosophy, and I think we're seeing that in a lot of things that bear out kind of, right now, a lot of those answers are substantially better. So I really liked this one. There are a couple of parts that don't 100% work for me as well. Not that they're bad, but like so there's a part where all three of the leads have these like fantasy sequences about kind of what would happen, and they're cute, but they also feel like when you've already seen them, they feel like they go on for a little longer than they need to. But whatever. It's still a fun movie. It's a classic, and I'm really glad that we got a chance to rewatch it and to talk about it.
Well, you mentioned this wasn't necessarily a formative film for you. Mary retorted in the chat, it's because you're a guy. It was a milestone for her, for sure, and very influential for a young lady. Not being a young lady myself, I will say maybe on the flip side of that same coin, Mary, it was influential for me watching this with my mom growing up because, as a 6-year-old kid, I didn't understand why women didn't make the same amount of money that men did. I didn't understand why women weren't getting the same jobs that men were. And so I remember having conversations with my mom, it's like 6 years old, about the glass ceiling and workplace equality and, pay equality. And so growing up, like, after seeing this film, I saw it happening everywhere. Even when I like got into high school, the female teachers were dissatisfied because they weren't making the same amount of money that the male teachers were. Going into college, I had a lot of female friends who were very concerned because they were women and they were entering fields dominated by men. And, I think this movie helped me to kind of see the world in a way that maybe previous generations didn't so much. And yeah, it's goofy. Yeah, it's kooky. Yeah, it's a little crazy. But I think it shined a spotlight, right, on a social issue that really needed to have that spotlight on it. And yeah, there's been lots of other things that have attempted to do the same thing, but none of them have had Tomlin, Dolly Parton, and Jane Fonda doing the heavy lifting. So I love this movie to pieces. I think it's great with its social message. I'm real weird when it comes to comedy, but for some reason, this movie tickles my funny bone like crazy. Jim, I think we were watching it, and you turned to me and you were like, I don't get how you can watch all these comedy movies and absolutely hate them, but some slapstick Lily Tomlin tickles your fancy. But it did for some reason.
Right. And that's absolutely true. I mean, but like you said, comedy is a very, very personal thing, right? And certain things can just kind of, the visuals, the style, the tone, and the comedy, the jokes kind of line up for you in this movie. But back to Mary's point, being a formative movie, I think this is an interesting kind of movie. It's kind of one of these like spoonful of sugar movies, I guess I'll call it, right? Where you have all this comedy and lighthearted, slapsticky, goofy, zaniest stuff going on. But underneath, there's this, this message. Message is a bad word, but there's kind of something to be learned here, I guess, for especially given the time that it came out, right? 1980, coming off the 70s. And it wasn't like in your face, like, hey, women are strong and they can do these jobs and they're undervalued and all this stuff. That's not what the movie was. And it was interesting that it brought such a wide audience to that point. I think it was really brilliant of the writers to be able to, kind of frame the movie in that way and still get the point across that the movie's trying to make. So I really appreciate it for that.
Absolutely. Gene Baker. Holy hell, Gene.
Whoa,
good to
Gene.
see you. Hi. Oh, we miss Gene. He used to live in Tucson. He moved to Alaska, of all places. We haven't seen him in a long time. But Gene, look at that handsome face.
It's only like 10 in the morning there right now. Something like that.
Gene says, great to see my friends Jim and Brad. Gene, it's wonderful to see you too. He says, 40 years from the premiere, I feel old. I remember seeing it in the theater. I remember and love the part where Dolly's character hog ties Dabney's character and kidnaps him. So funny. I agree. That is super fun. I love that. But watching this movie again as an adult the other day, I realized I love it for another reason. Seeing the very sexy back then Dabney Coleman all tied up and kind of dominated a little bit, I think tripped some triggers for me. Just saying. That was great. Although I just wish he would have been wearing less clothes while he was all tied up and trussed up. Would that have been too much to ask?
Yeah, there were many scenes of him in the swing from the ceiling, right? In his in the chains and leather and stuff. I'm like, oh, this is pretty kinky.
It's interesting. You had mentioned the sort of the spoonful of sugar, the tone on this one, and I think you're absolutely right on that, Jim. Like, this is a movie that I think that it makes it shouldn't be a complex issue, but unfortunately it is. It makes a very complex issue very digestible and palatable. One of those ones where it sort of sneaks the message in, and then at the end you realize, like, oh shit, that's what I just watched. And I think especially for something that came out in 1980, I think there's some genius in figuring that out. They could have made this darker with some more murders or what have you, and people not making it out. And I think that would have completely undercut everything that they are trying to say here. And honestly, I don't know that it would have fit as well with these three actresses' strengths.
Right.
I think that what we got here was just three people who I would be really interested in seeing, because I didn't look this up, but I'd be interested in seeing how much of some of the conversational, like back and forths, how much of that Tomlin improvised. I have a feeling a good percentage of it, and I'm okay with that because she seems like the type of person who definitely adds to a script when she improvises instead of subtracts.
Oh yeah, she joined the cast of The West Wing in its fourth season, and I know that show is like 25 years old at this point. But she was very famous on that show for just completely ad-libbing like 90% of her jokes and material. She just spouted off, and they were like, "Oh my god, that's brilliant! We got to include that." She is just such a phenomenally gifted comedian. And anything that she's in is just stellar. It's really got me wanting to go back. Jim, you and I watched I think the first half of the first season of Grace and Frankie on Netflix a while back. And it had like 7 seasons or something. So I guess it was a long time ago.
Is it still going? I think it might be still going. Or it just ended.
Wrapping or wrapped?
Maybe.
I think it just ran through. Yeah, I think it might.
Yeah.
Well, it might still be right. It's hard to tell whether something is wrapped right now
in this time,
especially right now. But either way, I feel like Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda had some really great chemistry in 9 to 5, and I liked what we saw in the first part of the first season of Grace and Frankie. I'd love to go back and revisit that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the chemistry here, and that's another theme in this movie that I think gets overlooked, is that these three women form this bond and kind of this friendship as a team that is just kind of a joy to watch throughout the movie, right? You know that they're a formidable trio of women, and nothing is really gonna get between them and what they think is right, and some of the injustices that have been just hurled at them from the corporate environment as well as the asshole boss that they have. But it was just a joy some of the joy of this movie was just kind of watching them all, watching that trio come together and form a friendship.
And seeing sort of the results of that unlikely friendship, right? Like Dolly Parton's character was the office slut. She, everyone saw her as sleeping with the boss, right? So, quote, slut. She wasn't sleeping with the boss. She was, spurring his advances, but everyone thought that. And, the truth kind of comes out, and these three unlikely ladies come together. They kidnap their boss, and then they oddly turned their company into something very prescient for modern day companies. Things like in-house daycare, paid family medical leave,
all of it.
All kinds of things that like modern day companies now often have as kind of standard. Back in 1980, if you'd mentioned like an in-house daycare, you'd have been fucking laughed out of the building. And now it's just a thing that a lot of companies have. So big kudos to this movie and our comedic trio for maybe planting some seeds that grew into those things in real life.
Well, especially when and you see that bleed over into the real world in a lot of pretty valuable places. Without going too deep down the rabbit hole, the company I work for has a female CEO and female COO, and they brought those sensibilities very specifically to the conventions that we would go to. And for years, our company hosted a nursery changing area booth within this convention hall, just so that the mothers who were having to walk the floor with their kids had a place where they could step off the floor, be with their kids for a second, not have to like go to a bathroom or anything like that. And that's the type of thing that was within our industry kind of revolutionary at the time. And this is not going back 40, 50, 60 years. This was, the last decade and a half. So it shows that when you have people that are from the lived experience, basically lived minority experiences in whatever context we happen to be talking about in leadership roles, you end up having more support for the people that are represented within that group in more positive ways. You just have to have that.
Absolutely. I think we've come so far. As Michael in the live chat, though, says, we still have room to grow, right? Equal pay for equal work, unfortunately, is still not a universal standard. We still see that inequity happening, and I absolutely think it needs to be, fixed as soon as possible.
And that was the first thing that we got to see that even in this movie, like all of those wonderful things that they did. Let's do this. Let's do that. Except for the equal pay for equal work stuff, like that. Even within this fantasy of a movie, that wasn't even allowed to stick.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was dangerous thinking at the time. That could probably only go so far.
Yeah, the audience walks out. Well, Will, I know you got me when you said, baby changing station. I think you were talking about diapers, not just like a place where you could bring your baby and change it for another one.
So we tried one of those too, but it was weird. People kept trying to make change for their babies, just like, okay, mine's a little chunky. Can I bring it in for like a set of twins? Like it was a mess. It was a mess.
Was there like a plastic tub labeled "Take a baby, leave a baby"?
Put the baby in, get 5 20s and a 10 and 3 5s.
Oh my God.
That's the internet, Jim.
That's just
where you pay for babies.
Babies for sale, but only in cryptocurrency.
Right. What did you guys think? Oh, go ahead, Will.
I was gonna say there was a character arc that happened in the background of this movie that I absolutely loved. It was the alcoholic who
Margaret?
Margaret. First of all, I love that when the characters kind of at their crisis point before they all decide to get stoned and dream up murder, they all take their individual breaks by going to the bar, and each time they hear "Atta girl," and I love that line delivery. It's one of my favorite things from the movie. But you then just have this now that she's allowed to decorate her desk and feel like a sense of ownership over the work that she does, and now that there is an Alcoholics Anonymous style program that's available through her workplace, when they come back 6 weeks later or whatever it is to check in, now she's sobering up and she seems happier and more invested in what she's doing. It was really fun just to sort of see her little character arc kind of weave through the background of the story.
Oh, yeah, especially when the Dabney Coleman character is walking by and he's like, wait, was that the drunk? Really? Like, duh, if you enable people to be their best selves, maybe they will be.
Yeah, that character Margaret was played by actress Peggy Pope. Unfortunately, we lost her this year.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, and she's been in a few other movies that we've seen. The Last Starfighter, a movie called Choke. I don't know if you remember the movie Choke with what's his name? Help me out.
It's from Chuck Palahniuk wrote that. He's the dude that wrote Fight Club and a few other things.
Yeah. I loved her character. I wanted to see more of her, but we didn't get that. But we got enough. Certainly, she got a commendable character arc out of it.
Yes, she did. Wonderful, wonderful to see. Even characters who aren't necessarily front and center in this film still getting something, chunky and fun, endearing, and progressive to do. Mm-hmm. So I think 40 years after this movie came out, and I still can't believe it's been 40 years. Oof, that means I'm going to be 40 in February. Oh, goodness. I think we're still learning things from this film. It still applies. So for anybody out there that hasn't seen 9 to 5 yet, I think this is a really, really fun film. I think it's worth your time. We're in quarantine. What the hell else are you going to do right now? Definitely recommend you track it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah.
Seems like We're all agreed. So do it. Check it out. We've got some other plugs coming your way. We're going to go ahead and pivot and put some other things on your radar. Speaking of quarantine, if you need things to watch, maybe we can help you out. Real quick, though, Mary says, I can feel the hurricane blowing in here in Houston. The wind is picking up. Mary, please be safe. I know you have little ones. I know you have kids. Little is pejorative. I'm not sure how old they are, but when you have a kid, they're always little in your heart. Please be safe. We heart you. And that goes for everybody, whether you're affected by the California and Colorado wildfires right now, COVID, whatever it is. Definitely, please stay safe, stay sane, be careful. Hamstrax is late to the party. Hey, Hammy. He says, but it's Sam Rockwell.
That's right. You choke. Very good.
That's right. That's right. So there's your answer on that one, Jim. Well, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and shift over to some plugs. I'm going to go real quick because I know we're going kind of long anyway. It's a late night. We got a chance to catch up with a documentary over the weekend that we've been wanting to see for quite a while. It recently came out on Disney Plus, and that documentary is called Howard, all about Howard Ashman, one half of the very famous singer, songwriter, musical Disney duo, Ashman and Menken. The documentary, I don't want to go into spoilers. I mean, it's hard to spoil a documentary about a real person, I guess, but that team was behind famous Disney films and songs like The Little Mermaid, Part of Your World from that film, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and some other films. So, growing up, obviously I saw those films. I loved them. I loved the music. Little Shop of Horrors with Rick Moranis. I totally loved the music from that. I never gave a second thought growing up to who the fuck was behind those amazing songs that I loved so much. But then as an adult, I met this gentleman right here, Jim Pugliafico, who's one of his all-time favorite songs is Part of Your World from The Little Mermaid. He was like, oh my God, I love Ashman and Menken. And I'm like, who are Ashman and Menken? And he just looked at me with this look like, who are you? Why are we dating? But then he was like, let me educate you. And so I learned a lot through Jim, and I love you so much. Thank you for that. But being able to see this documentary and see all this archival footage of Ashman working with Jodie Benson, who was the voice of Ariel, him and Menken, and all the things that they were able to do and accomplish together was magical. I think there's only been one other documentary I've seen before that's made me cry, and that was the Mr. Rogers documentary. This officially became the second documentary to make me cry. And I like outright bawled a couple times. Like, it's weird for real life stuff like that to do that in a doc, but I will be forever grateful.
It's not weird for men to cry, Brad. It's not weird.
Well, no, of course not. Look, I embrace masculine tears. But I'm just so thankful to have this documentary and learn about the man who, like in the dedication that plays at the end, the man who gave a mermaid her voice and a beast his soul. God, it was so fucking good. So if you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out. It's on Disney Plus right now. It's called Howard.
Definitely had us both crying on the couch. That's a scene for you. Go ahead and imagine that one. Yeah.
I got tears in my popcorn. Anyway, Jim, what do you have this week?
I have something totally different. It is a documentary series that's on HBO right now, if you have HBO Max. And it's called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. This is a documentary crime series about... it's actually about more than one thing. It's about the investigation into a series of rapes and murders in California, starting in the 70s, I think, and going through the 80s, of the East Area rapist and the original Night Stalker. This is all one person perpetuating all these like horrendous crimes. Mostly against women, but also some against couples and men in their homes. So it was horrifying. And for years and years and years, this crime went unsolved. And they talk about that. They talk about how a community of amateur folks online came together to investigate using the clues and police records and eyewitness accounts to try to resolve this decades-long mystery of who the murderer rapist was and solve this crime. And the other story that's told is about the person who kind of pulled this all together and actually authored a book on the whole subject called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. Her name was Michelle McNamara, and she is was the real life wife of Patton Oswalt, comedian actor Patton Oswalt. So it's about her life. It's about her investigating the crime, her writing the book. It's fascinating for any fans of the whole true crime genre that's out there right now. This is a must see. It's on HBO. It's called I'll Be Gone in the Dark. It's a six part. Each part is 1 hour thing. So it's a kind of a quick binge, like a weekend binge kind of thing. You can watch on HBO. Check it out. I'll Be Gone in the Dark.
Yeah, between this and Lovecraft Country, HBO Max has really come out swinging lately. So, yeah.
And I mean, they've got Justice League, the Snyder Cut coming. So, right? I mean, how can they go wrong?
I mean, that's the knockout punch right there.
Well, babe, thanks so much for that plug. It seems to be resonating in the live chat quite a bit. Hamstrak says the audiobook is great as well. So maybe something else to check out, babe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Will, what have you got this week?
I'm really big on finding opportunities to find new and inventive films, because even though we are in kind of strange times right now, there are just so many amazing movies coming out. And one of them that just recently came out that I was able to catch up with is a punk rock horror comedy called Uncle Peckerhead, which the name is going to throw you, but it's great. It's this three-piece punk outfit, lead singer of which, or one of the two lead singers of which, is a bearded gay bear character. So I mean, it fits the show.
There you go.
But the three of them are trying to figure out how they're going to go on their little mini tour. They have a few venues after their van gets repossessed. So they go around looking for someone
like Green Room all over again.
I was going to say, isn't that the premise of Green Room?
Not quite.
So they go around trying to find a van to borrow, and eventually they find one. The guy that owns it, this dude that goes by the name of Peckerhead, or Peck for short, says, "Yeah, you know what? I'll let you borrow my van, but caveat is I get to come with you guys and be your roadie." And like, all right, cool, let's do this. They quickly find out that Peck, this like very kind of just simple, very friendly, kind of down to earth kind of guy, also turns into a demon every night at midnight and has bloodthirsty rage. So they're having to navigate that while going on the tour. It's a lot of fun. The premise is, I mean, we joke like the Green Room thing. There aren't really a lot of movies that really feel like they match this story, like what it did. I felt like as the whole time I was watching it, like this felt like when you sit down at a festival and watch a Midnighter, sometimes it can be a coin flip if you're going to watch something that you absolutely love or absolutely something that you hate. This would be an absolute killer Midnighter slot. It's energetic. It keeps going. It's really, really, really funny. And it's not super long. It's like an hour and a half. It gets in, it does what it needs to do, and it gets right back out. I don't know. I'm seeing Hamstrak saying fuck and yes. And I know because we've talked, I think this might be his number one film of the year. I'm not exaggerating. This is fun. Go check it out. It's called Uncle Peckerhead. It's a fun movie. And again, assuming you like comedy horrors.
Well, I did watch the trailer because I had seen a few mentions of it, maybe in Twitter or whatever, and it kind of looked interesting. I'll probably get around to it. Where is it? Where can I find it?
It's on the streaming platforms. It's on Prime Video for $3.99. I think there's also there's also like I think they put it up on YouTube too for like free.
$3.99.
But so between that and for like a couple buck rental on the major platforms, Hamstreck says easily give it all the Oscars. Like that's I know it's very high up for him, but yeah, it's high up for me too. It's super good.
I mean, if there's a bear character, I'm sold. I'd check it out too.
The bear character is great because I mean he's a bearded, shaved head punk rock singer, and the whole time, like the first parts of the movie, I'm like, I think this dude might be gay, and he is.
There's a bear and a pecker. There's a bear and a pecker in this movie.
There you go. There you go.
Just don't Google Peckerhead like I just did, because you'll see all kinds of things you really don't want to see that aren't associated with the movie, unless you want to see those things, in which case go ahead and Google it. But
some of those things I kind of do want to see, but yeah, whatever.
All right, well, as always, this has been a fuck ton of fun. I've said fuck a lot on this show this week. Don't know why I did. Maybe it's the lack of sleep. Been burning the candle at both ends, but thank you for being patient with my profanity. And thank you, Jim and Will, so much for such a fun, great discussion about 9 to 5. It's also good to talk through some of those DC trailers coming out of FanDome. We're going to figure out what we're going to do for next week when we get to it. But between now and our next recording, if anyone wants to connect, Jim, where can people find you online?
Find me, as I mentioned, on Twitter. That's where I like to keep up with what's going on in the movie world, at JJP Out West, my initials JJP Out West, or find me on Facebook under my name right here, Jim Pugliafco.
All right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Chris Lopez. Oh my God, Chris, I didn't know you were here in the chat. Sexy voice of the Movie Bears podcast. Chris Lopez joined us 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, something like that. Chris, we miss you. Come back soon if there's an old classic film you want to talk about. I'd love to have you back. If only
Chris were here to say, Uncle Peckerhead.
That would be amazing. Chris, can you record that and text it to me, please? Please, that'd be great. Will, where can people interact with you online?
3 major spots. You can find me on Twitter at Whatever Cove. You can find me on Facebook. Just look for William Lindis and send me a message first. And you can also find me on letterboxd.com. Look for William Lindis. Add me. I'll add you back.
All right. Awesome. You can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. Or you can find me on Twitter at iBradPro. Same name on Letterboxd. We had a bunch of people in the live chat tonight. We didn't get to read every comment, but just so much love for all of you who continue to tune in week after week. Folks who are new to the show are popping in. So great having you with us and being part of that conversation. If you were listening via the magic of digital tape delay on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you access your podcasts, be sure to check out our back catalog. This is episode 377 of the Movie Bears podcast. Guys, we're coming up on 400 a lot faster, I think, than we think we are. And our 8-year anniversary. I know. And our 8-year anniversary is coming up in December, which is like a hop, skip, and a jump away. We won't think about how close the holidays are. But for those of you who've been tuning in, year after year, episode after episode, we love you. Thank you so much for supporting the show as always. And we'll see you next time. Goodbye, everybody. Be safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.